Good evening, everybody. Thank you so much for joining us. We are delighted and honored to have best-selling author Kristin Harmel with us tonight to talk about her newest historical fiction novel, The Book of Lost Names, which actually releases tomorrow. This program is brought to you by the Friends of the Lexington Main Library, a nonprofit organization that helps raise money and support for the main library here in Lexington, South Carolina. The platform we are using this evening is called GoToWebinar. So we would like to thank the Lexington County Library for allowing the Friends to use this software. My name is Marlena White. I am the director of the Friends of the Lexington Main Library. Many of us are getting much more comfortable with these video event and conferencing formats, but just to do a little housekeeping, there is a chat feature on GoToWebinar. We are going to encourage people to answer questions and ask questions throughout this event. You can see us and you can hear us, but we cannot see or hear you. So the only way to communicate is through the chat. So be sure to put your questions into the chat. Let's give the chat a quick test. If you are a current Friends of the Library member, go ahead and put your name in the chat and say hello. We would love to hear from our friends. We also love to have new friends. If you are not a current Friends member, we would love for you to learn more about us. And you can do that by visiting our website, which is www.lmlfriends.org. We also have a little promotion going on right now. If you join the Friends of the Library between now and August 31st, you will get a $10 off coupon to use at future book sales. So the book sales are not on right now, but we know that they're coming back. So a $10 off coupon you can use for the future. Before I introduce our special guest, there's one more thing I'd like to remind everybody. One lucky participant this evening is going to get a free copy of the Book of Lost Names, personalized by Kristin. So I have some staff members with me here at the library, and they're going to help me randomly select that name, and we will announce it at the end of the program. So now to the main event. Kristin Harmel has written 13 novels, including her newest, The Book of Lost Names. Successfully writing, researching, and interviewing since the age of 16, Kristin's stories bring history to life, and her characters captivate readers from the opening chapter to the very end. Many of you may be familiar with Kristin's wildly successful Facebook page, Friends in Fiction, where she, fellow authors, Mary Alice Monroe, Patty Callahan Henry, Mary Kay Andrews, and Christy Woodson Harvey host live discussions about writing and books. What a lively group. In just over 3 months, it has 13,000 followers and climbing. So if you have not yet liked that page, please do so. I think I have used up all my words for now, so I'm going to go ahead and turn it over to the headliner. Ladies and gentlemen, Miss Kristin Harmel.
Everybody, thank you so much for that great introduction, and thank you so much for having me here tonight. And you know, we were saying this before we went live, but I'm really happy to be starting this off with a library group tonight. My book comes out tomorrow, and the main character is a librarian, and so libraries really mean a lot to me. And you know, we were talking about this beforehand a little bit, but you know, things are strange right now. Things are different in different parts of the country. I know some libraries are open, some are not, some are open for curbside pickup. But wherever you are, just remember that your library is a resource, and it's a resource that I think you would benefit from continuing to support and continuing to have support from. So I will tell you, my library system is the Orange County Library System here in Orlando. And I think I have 4 books checked out right now on my Overdrive account, and more on my waiting list. So I've been reading even during this, even not physically being able to go in, I've been doing that. So thank you, Marlena, for the work you're doing with the Friends of the Lexington Main Library. I know it's really valuable work, and I appreciate being a part of it tonight. All right, so let me start off tonight by telling you a little bit about the Book of Lost Names. So the Book of Lost Names, which comes out tomorrow, I can't believe it's finally here, is the story of a female forger in World War II who stumbles into the French resistance mostly by accident and winds up helping save the lives of hundreds of children. So she and her mom are fleeing the Nazis themselves. They're living in Paris. Her father, who is a Polish-born or a Polish-born Jew, is arrested, and they flee to a small French mountain town in the unoccupied zone, where a priest working for a local resistance network finds out about the false papers that she has forged for herself to get herself and her mother out, approaches her and offers her help in getting her father out of Drancy, a detention center for Jews outside of Paris, in exchange for her helping him with some forged documents. So she agrees because she thinks it's going to help her dad, and she thinks it's just going to be sort of this short-term thing. But soon she meets Remy, an accomplished forger with a little bit of an ego, who grudgingly agrees to take her on as his assistant. And then it turns out she's actually better and more innovative than he is at these forgeries. So she's passionate not just about saving the children who they're working to save. Now, the majority of the people they are forging documents for are Jewish children who are trying to get out of France into Switzerland. But so not only about forging these documents, but also she wants to preserve their identities, especially those who are too young to remember who they really are once their names are changed. So she and Remy decide to encode those identities in a 1732 religious text, which they begin referring to as the Book of Lost Names. But toward the end of the war, after their resistance cell is blown and Remy disappears, the book goes missing too, looted by the Nazis, as sort of like as they're pulling out of France toward the end of the war. And she, with it kind of vanish all of these secrets. So it's not at that point just the names of the children. It's messages that she and Remy are passing back and forth. So 60 years later, Ava is a librarian. See, we love libraries, working in Florida, and she happens to glimpse the book in an article in the New York Times about Nazi looted books and the search to return them to their rightful owners. So as the story unfolds in the past, we also see Ava in the present trying to summon the courage to travel to Berlin, where the book is now located, to finally uncover the last secret that may or may not be held within the pages of the Book of Lost Names. So of course, that's where the title of the book comes from. The book within the book is called the Book of Lost Names. And trying to think, I guess, let me start by just reading the first page and a half, just since the book's not out until tomorrow. I know some of you have already gotten it. Some of the shipments went out really early, and some of the Barnes and Nobles around the country actually had it out already, which is interesting. But so some of you already have it. But for those of you who don't, this will take a minute just to read the first page and a half, and you'll see my love for libraries. So it's a Saturday morning, and I'm midway through my shift at the Winter Park Public Library when I see it. The book I last laid eyes on more than 6 decades ago. The book I believed had vanished forever. The book that meant everything to me. It's staring out at me from a photograph in the New York Times, which someone has left open on the returns desk. The world goes silent as I reach for the newspaper, my hand trembling nearly as much as it did the last time I held the book. It can't be, I whisper. I gaze at the picture. A man in his 70s looks back at me, his snowy hair sparse and wispy, his eyes frog-like behind bulbous glasses. 60 years after end of World War II, German librarian seeks to reunite looted books with rightful owners, declares the headline. And I want to cry out to the man in the image that I am the rightful owner of the book he's holding, the faded, leather-bound volume with the peeling bottom right corner and the gilded spine bearing the title, Epîtres et Évangiles. It belongs to me and to Remy, a man who died long ago, a man I vowed after the war to think of no more. But he's been in my thoughts this week anyhow, despite my best efforts. Tomorrow, the 8th of May, the world will celebrate the 60th anniversary of Victory in Europe Day. It's impossible, with all the young newscasters speaking solemnly of the war, as if they could conceivably understand it, not to think of Remy, not to think of the time we spent together then, not to think of the people we saved and the way it all ended, though my son tells me I'm blessed to have such a sharp mind in my old age. Like many blessings, this one is mixed. Most days, I just long to forget. So that's the beginning of the book. And I do want to answer your questions. I think these these Zooms, or these, not, we're not on Zoom, but these virtual events go so much better when we're all interacting, when I get to answer the things you really want to know. So if you have questions, you can start posting them now, but I wanted to show you a few things that I thought you might find interesting. And for those of you who have already been to a few of my events, I apologize, because this is a familiar show and tell. You will have seen all these things a million times. Um, and I keep forgetting to pull out the other one I have, which I'll tell you about, but I can't get up and get it, because then you would see that I'm wearing sweatpants, which just gives away the whole facade of my glamorous appearance. So to give you a little bit of an insight into the book, I will show you some of the things I used in my research. I will start with this, which I think is fascinating. It's a Nazi-issued travel document from December 2nd, 1940, issued in Paris for a French citizen who was seeking to travel throughout the country. Now, you would have needed one of these to get past Nazi checkpoints during the war. And therefore, it would have been something very common for forgers to forge, and something essential for them to provide people with. Because if you were a fleeing Jew, you would not have a permit like this. Or if you were an Allied pilot who'd been shot down in northern France and you were trying to get out, through the Pyrenees or somewhere, you would need one of these to say that you were a French person and allow you through. So this is something very common that would have been forged. And it was really important to me to have things like this in my research, and actually things like this that I could put my hands on, as opposed to just looking at pictures of them. Because if you look online, you can find pictures of these sort of things. But in writing about how a forger would have worked, I wanted to know, what would a stamp have felt like? What would it have looked like? Was it raised? Could you feel it? What did the paper feel like? I mean, I don't know if you can tell, but this is very, very, very thin paper, which is different than other documents that they would have had at the time. So in the book, when I talk about different paper types, I believe there's actually a scene in the book where they receive parachuted papers from Free Algeria, I think. This is the kind of thing that would have been dropped, because I mean, this wasn't something you could just go and get necessarily, and it had the type of paper had to match up, or sort of the jig would be up. So this was one thing that was really fascinating to have, and I say this every time, but I'm terrified every time I pull it out that I'm gonna see, now I've just dropped it. I'm terrified I'm gonna like rip it in half, but so far so good. I'm jinxing myself, right? Another thing that was really interesting from my research, I think, was the Journal Officiel. So if you read the book, this is also mentioned in the book. This is the official government gazette of France. It still exists, although I believe it's just online now. I'm not positive. But this is where everything legal that happened in the country was recorded. So marriages, divorces, naturalizations, property transfers, things like that. This was something that forgers relied heavily upon, because you couldn't just make it up. You couldn't just say John Smith or Pierre Boulanger is, age 35. This is who he is. It had to come from it had to be able to be backed up by a real source. So this is one way that forgers found real people to base forged documents on. So this was really important to understand, because it's mentioned several times in the book, but also for me, for pulling character names. Some of the minor characters who were just mentioned once in passing actually were names I myself pulled from the Journal Officiel, because it is a great source of real names that would have been accurate for the time. So that was kind of interesting. And the thing I forgot to bring over, and that I can't get because I would reveal to you my sweatpants, is a baptismal certificate. So if you join me at one of my future events, I will show you that. I just have to remember to bring it over. But it was a baptismal certificate. I believe that one was from 1942. And for children, especially young children, they wouldn't have had identity cards, which were something that forgers would have forged for older people. But in order to prove that a Jewish child was actually your Christian child, you might have used a baptismal certificate. So that was something that that forgers would have forged also. So it was important to me to have that. And they're much more ornate than I would have thought. I thought they were sort of just official documents, and they really weren't. So I'll have to show that to you at another Zoom if you join me, or another event like this. But finally, the most important thing, I think, is the real life Book of Lost Names. So the story about the coded names within the book was fiction. But when I had the idea to write this book, I thought, you know what, I can't just imagine the book. I have to have something I can hold in my hand, and something that I can flip through the pages of to actually do these forgeries, or to do the encoding of these forgeries. So I'll explain it in a second, but I do have to show you. The person who designed this cover didn't know this book existed and had never seen it. And I think she knocked it out of the park. I mean, it looks really similar. And then one of my favorite things about this book cover is the spine. I don't know if you can see it, but it doesn't really match the cover. It matches this. So it looks like the spine of an old book. And so does this. I mean, they match. It's crazy. Like, I can't believe it. It feels like it's like the book and the cover that are meant to be. So I'm super impressed with Chelsea McGuckin, the cover designer, super happy with this one. But this is actually the real life 1732 religious text that I based the Book of Lost Names, within the Book of Lost Names, on. So Ava and Remy basically choose a random book from the church library where they're working. And this is just a nondescript book that you would have found in a 1942 church library, Catholic church library. It is a guide to the weekly masses. There's nothing valuable about it, nothing particularly interesting about it. I mean, other than it's from 1732, which is pretty interesting if you ask me. But they figured that this way it would keep the secrets safe. So they hid it in plain sight, and within the pages they use something called the Fibonacci sequence, which is a mathematical code, or a mathematical sequence, a mathematical series, to encode the names of the children they were saving, or children they were sending on to safety. And so as I was writing about that, and you can see, I mean, it's just this beautiful old book with these, I don't know if you can tell, my light's screwing things up, but just these ornately lettered pages. It's so neat. I love old books. But as I was writing the novel, every time I mentioned the Book of Lost Names within the novel, I was using this book and the real words written on the pages to write the codes. So this is very valuable to me. It's probably not a super valuable book, but that's kind of key to understanding the present day story too. The Nazis, when they were pulling out of Western Europe, as they were retreating and being beaten back, they were just stealing things left and right, but they were really stealing books. I mean, to a huge degree. And one of the things that's mentioned in the novel is that to this day, most libraries in Germany still have books that were looted by the Nazis, 75 years ago. And in fact, the main library in Berlin, the largest library in Berlin, which has about 3.5 million books in its collection, estimates that about 1 million of those books, a little over 1 million, so about a third, are actually books that were stolen during World War II. And so there's an effort going on to reunite those books with their rightful owners. But it's really kind of an insurmountable task. And a lot of them don't necessarily have monetary value, but as in the book, within the Book of Lost Names, some of them have great personal value. And so, we've read stories about, or seen stories or movies even about the looted art or looted jewelry or things like that. But the books that were taken were valuable too, because books mean everything. And I think that's why libraries are so important to me, and independent bookstores are so important to me. It's because books feed us, books inspire us, books sustain us. I mean, even during a dark time like we're going through right now, I think many of us turn to books for comfort. And when those books are taken, that's more than just a monetary loss. So that's why it was so important to me to talk about those lost books and to have this beautiful 1732 religious text in my hands, and to think of all the hands it's passed through over the years. It's kind of cool. So yeah,
we're getting some really strong reactions from our listeners to your documents and the nature of the documents and how you came across them and some of your research with it. We have questions from both Connie and Kendra were asking about, how did you find these documents?
In the most uninteresting way, eBay. When I knew I wanted to write this book and I had the idea for a book within a book, I began looking for rare book dealers in France who did business on eBay, because I knew then I could order a book from somebody reputable with a track record, with lots of reviews, and I could have the transaction processed without a problem. That's sometimes a difficulty with buying things in Europe if you're here. So this came from a rare book dealer in France. via eBay. And when this one got here, I was like, oh my gosh, it's exactly what I was looking for. And I knew this was going to be the book at the center of the book. The book dealer emailed me and said, I actually also have, so this is volume one. He said, I also have volume two. Would you also like volume two? And I was like, yes. So I have basically the identical book, but I mean, it looks identical on the outside, but it's volume two of the same series. That was from eBay. The Nazi travel permit is from eBay. The stacks of the Journal Officiel are from someone French on eBay. And all these people were people that I felt were vetted and reliable. I mean, just based on the reviews and based on based on being able to find an online presence outside of eBay also, which is like where they were selling these things, where, this was their profession. And then the baptismal certificate I have, actually, oddly enough, came from a seller in France, but that was on Etsy. So I couldn't find anything like that on eBay, and I didn't even know you could sell stuff that wasn't crafts on Etsy. I've always thought Etsy was for, crafts or things you make or, things like that. I guess I just don't know enough. But yeah, it was somebody who was selling old documents and things like that on Etsy, and it was someone in France and someone who checked out as reputable, and that's where the baptismal document came from.
Thank you so much. Lots of reactions and responses and questions about your, the documents and also your research. Susan is asking, what is your favorite part of the research process? Is it getting behind the scenes and getting your, does it really make a difference having these tangible items in your hands when you're creating the story?
It does. And that was a little bit more of an enjoyable process with The Winemaker's Wife, which was all about champagne, because I kept just picking champagne and saying, oh, this is for work. I have to do this. Excuse me while I stumble around drinking my bubbles. No, it helps enormously to have the items. I feel like it's one thing to read about things. And that sounds like a weird thing for an author to say, because I'm saying it's not enough to read about it. You have to go out and get the documents. No, like I felt like I needed to go out and get the documents so that I could make them as real as possible in my book. And it's the same reason why, I joke a lot about, the horrible, task of champagne drinking throughout the writing of The Winemaker's Wife. But it is really, truly one reason why I drank a lot of champagne writing that book, because I wanted to be able to, I'm a big, I really am interested in wine, and I have, tried to become a little bit more educated about wine. But just to be able to taste that and understand like how the earth that it came from influenced the taste of it, and like what was the magic, that was created out of the earth that was soaked with blood during World War II and World War I. I mean, it was so fascinating to me. But just to have those things at my fingertips. And then, of course, for that book, I also went to Champagne and spent some time with champagne makers and in the champagne cellars. And I think anytime you're writing a book, you have to immerse yourself as much as possible in the place, even if the place is things. Does that make sense? So like writing the book about champagne, I wanted to remind myself what the cellars smelled like, or how how the underground clairière twisted, or how the dark corners would feel as you were approaching them, or what the wall felt like, or it's all those things that I could never find in a book, and I couldn't just call somebody up and ask that. Same thing with this. I couldn't just call a document expert up and say, so what does it feel like to hold this document in your hand? Or, things like that. I needed them at my fingertips to be able to make them more real for you, if that makes sense, for you, the reader. And I think the other part of her question was what do I enjoy about, was that right? What do I enjoy about the research? Was that it?
Yes, and this actually, Susan was asking, what was your favorite part of the writing process? Was it the research, or was it more? And Terry is asking this as well about character development. What is your favorite part of the writing process?
So I love diving into the research because that gives me a world to build. It lets me build the world in which I'm going to set my characters loose and let them do their thing and let them develop and let them have these amazing emotional journeys and these things that drive them to go from ordinary to extraordinary, which is a phrase I keep using. I think that's at the center of a lot of my books, the people who are ordinary people becoming extraordinary or choosing to become extraordinary, which is something I think we all have within us. But I do the kind of the broad scope research first, and I really enjoy that because it sets me within the world. And once I can feel the world, it kind of frees me to create the characters and create the story. But I think my favorite part really is creating the characters that fit within that world, and then seeing who they develop into. So I do prefer the plotting and the characterization, but while I'm doing all that, I'm constantly doing research to fill things in. So it's really, I don't know that I could ever say it's sort of an either or one part's more important than the other. They kind of go hand in hand. And there are always things I discover in the research that influence the characters, and things I discover about the characters that necessitate more research. So it kind of goes back and forth.
That's fantastic. And, when you have to, like you said about the winemaker's wife, when you have to research in that aspect, I mean, it's a tough job, but someone's got to do it.
I mean, I don't know why this book wasn't about chocolate. What was I thinking? Like, I did the wine book. Like, what, Clearly I missed the boat. You really can't eat these chocolate.
Maybe an idea. Maybe, grab a pen, an idea for a next topic. So we've got some other great comments in here. I just wanted to let you know that Naomi cannot wait to read the book. She's very excited. And we've also got a Friends president from Massachusetts on with us today. So welcome, friend from Massachusetts. Thank you, Lauren, for joining us.
I'm actually from Massachusetts. Originally, I was born, I lived in Peabody when I was young, and I was born in Newton. So that's my home. Originally,
Lauren is joining us from there. So we've got lots of questions about, Judy has asked, and several other people have asked, several of your books were set during World War II. Where did this interest start?
So a couple places, and it's a great question. So I've always wanted to write about World War II. Well, not always. I mean, I didn't used to know about World War II when I was like 6, right? But I've always wanted to be a writer, and you know, I used to think when I was young that writing and having the ability to change the world for the better were two separate, mutually exclusive things. And so I thought, I would love to write books, but I also want to do some good in the world. I was this, idealistic, weird teenager who didn't have like pop stars on my wall. I had posters of John F. Kennedy and Martin Luther King Jr. and like dreamed of changing the world like them. But which I mean, I shouldn't make fun of myself. That was good. It was a good thing to be interested in. But I really thought until I read The Diary of Anne Frank that books were just to entertain. And reading The Diary of Anne Frank was the first time that I realized the impact that words could have. I mean, if you think about the impact she had, I mean, it still floors me just to think of how many people the world over generations now, have read her diary, have been touched by it, and who have a little bit more of an understanding about life and about their responsibility in it. And I mean, that was it was an incredibly meaningful realization for me, because it was the first time I realized that I didn't have to choose either or. I could write books that hopefully entertained people, and and writing has always been my passion. But I could also maybe in a little bit of a way hope to make the world a better place. And I don't think I'm doing any grand whatever with my books, but I really, like I was saying before, I just hope that one thing you get out of these books is that, or anybody has the capacity to be extraordinary, and that sometimes it's during the times of darkness, kind of like the one we're going through right now. I know this is a weird time in the world, but it's during those times of darkness that you have the ability to find the light. So I don't know. I just kind of feel like if you get any of that or anything from any of my books, maybe I've done a little bit of a good deed in helping bring you some comfort or helping inspire the way you think or whatever. But so anyhow, so that was Anne Frank, and I was always drawn to writing about this time period because of that. But then I was writing for People magazine in my, I wrote for People for about 12 years, 12 or 13 years. And one of the earlier stories I did for them, I think it was 2003 or 2004, was about a man named Henry Landworth, who was an extraordinary man. He was a Holocaust survivor. And his story really got under my skin. It just really got to me. He was in concentration camps from the ages of 13, or the age of 13 to the age of 18. Both of his parents were killed. He and his twin sister survived. He came to the United States with virtually nothing. He had $20, worked his way up. I mean, I'm not going to tell his whole story, but basically he became best friends with John Glenn and Walter Cronkite, which is incredible. Both of them individually told me he was one of the most extraordinary people they'd ever met, which if you think about all the people they've met, that's saying a lot. They went into business together. He became a millionaire. He put basically all his millions back into founding Give Kids the World, which is an organization that brings terminally ill kids and their parents to Orlando for like a dream vacation. And he said that the only time he could ever feel anything was when he was with those kids who were having their childhoods stolen from them with, you know, beyond their control, in the same way that his was stolen from him. And I was so moved by him saying that in order to survive the concentration camps, and he was at several camps, including Auschwitz, in order to survive, he had to learn to turn his feelings off. And once the war was over, he never in his life knew how to turn them back on. And I was so struck by that, struck by the fact that you could survive, but that something so crucial would be taken from you that would shape the rest of your life. And that became very much a part of The Sweetness of Forgetting, which was my first novel that dealt with the Holocaust and dealt with World War II. I wrote that in about 2010. It came out in 2012. And every one of my books since then has linked in some way to that. So there's always something I discover in the research for one book that leads me down a path to the next. So so that was those two things, I would say. Anne Frank and Henry Landworth really led me on this path.
Well, Carol was just asking a quick question. Speaking of Sweetness of Forgetting, any possibility that that could be turned into a film? She was hoping that that might be in the works.
Oh man, from your lips, I would love that. I've had several of my novels options. It's actually funny. I will tell you. So my first novel, back in 2006, I wrote it in 2003, 2004. It came out in early 2006. It was called How to Sleep with a Movie Star. Not a real how-to guide, I promise. No, you will not find that out from how to read the book or from reading the book. So it was a chick lit novel, you know, would have been like a romantic comedy type film. That was optioned. I get to go out to Hollywood. I get to meet with the producer, with the director. Like they had screenwriters hired. I mean, I thought this was happening. And then it just kind of went away. And it was my first lesson with Hollywood that like just because they option something doesn't really mean anything's happening, which is a lesson I've learned repeatedly since then. But so several of my books, including The Sweetness of Forgetting, have been optioned. There's actually even been a script written for The Life Intended, which was my 2014 book. But none of them have moved into production yet. So, I mean, fingers crossed. I have a film agent who works really hard with that. I actually wrote a script myself for The Winemaker's Wife because I've been trying to learn screenwriting, and that seemed like a good thing to try. So who knows? I mean, you never know. But yeah, maybe. World War II novels, especially ones that take place in two time periods. So all of my World War II novels have past and present scenes. Those are really expensive to make, and that makes them a difficult sell. So I think that's one of the things standing in my way. So we'll see. You know, when The Nightingale comes out, and I think The Nightingale's probably going to do really well, and I don't think that'll be until next year, but that might open the door to some more projects like that if that one finds success.
Well, we will keep our fingers crossed, certainly, and we'll stay posted on your social media sites to see anything. So,
I mean, as soon as anything's happening, believe me, I will be shouting it from the rooftops. You will not be able to miss it. There will not be a secret movie developing. Everybody will know, whether you want to or not.
So I don't want to give anything away on the plot, but Jency was asking about the code in the Book of Lost Names. How did that code come to be? Is that something that you created, or did you borrow that code, or?
So the Fibonacci sequence, which is what the code is based on, is a mathematical sequence that, how do I describe it? I've actually never had to describe it before. It's pretty simple. You add the two previous numbers together to get the next number. So you begin with 1, and then 1 plus 0 is 1. 1 plus 1 is 2. 1 plus 2 is 3, 2 plus 3 is 5, and on and on. So you add like the two numbers to get the next number, then the previous two to get the whatever. So that's sort of the code that's at the heart of the encoding that they do. And it's funny how I came across that because you would not expect it since I've always wanted to be a writer. But I was obsessed with math when I was a kid. I was a weird kid. I'm just, every little bit I reveal, you guys are like, who were you? You're odd. But which is probably true. But I used to really be obsessed with math. And I went through a period where like my just my dream as a kid was to be the first kid to solve unsolvable math problems that adults couldn't solve. So it was like before Good Will Hunting, but I think I was envisioning myself as basically Matt Damon from Good Will Hunting, which is silly. But but so the Fibonacci sequence is a code that I loved when I was a little kid. I mean, like little kid, like probably second grade, third grade, something like that. And I used to lie in bed at night and see how high I could add the Fibonacci sequence until I couldn't do it in my head anymore. So I never in a million years dreamed I would use it for anything. But when I was trying to come up with how on earth they would encode the names of this book, I thought, hey, wait a minute, I have an idea. There's something from my childhood. So see, you can always lie there and dream because you just never know when you might use the odd things that pop into your head.
And there are worse things to imagine yourself as than Matt Damon from Good Will Hunting. Fantastic character.
It was like before Good Will Hunting existed. I was just this kid who was like, yeah, math is so cool. I'm going to be the coolest mathematician as a kid. Yeah, it made no sense.
That is fantastic. So we do have some more questions here. I think we are scheduled to go to about 7:30, but we'll make sure we leave a little bit of room for doing the random drawing for one winner tonight for a copy of the Book of Lost Names. Also, Jessica and several other people have asked before we close out to get more details on how they can get to your Friends in Fiction page. So we'll be sure. So this is just a little bit of fun here. Matt Steinmetz is helping us over here at the library, and his mother has joined us. So we will welcome Matt's mom, Virginia. So thank you for joining us, Virginia.
Hey, Virginia.
So Mary Alice has asked, with all of this research, especially with your books based in France, The Winemaker's Wife, have you visited France? And could you talk a little bit about your travels if you have?
Yeah, so I lived in France. Great question. I lived in France in my early 20s. I lived in Paris. And if anybody has read The Sweetness of Forgetting, the 2012 novel I mentioned, I actually lived in the apartment where Rose, the grandmother in that book, lived during the 1940s. It was right in the heart of Paris. It was about a block and a half from the Eiffel Tower. You could see the Eiffel Tower out the window, including out the window of the shower. And it didn't occur to me until midway through the summer that if I could see out, they could see in, but another story for another day. But yeah, it was literally in the shadow of the Eiffel Tower. It was right next door to the American Library in Paris. And so, yeah, I lived there for a little while, and I have gone back at least once a year, every year until 4 years ago when I had my son. And I thought, okay, my Paris trips are over for a while, because I wanted to be home with him. And, there are risks to traveling overseas and whatever for, I was just being more cautious now that I have a child. But for book research, I ended up needing to go. So I mentioned, for example, going over there for the research into The Winemaker's Wife. I went to Champagne and spent some time there. But yeah, I've spent the bulk of my French time in Paris. But some of it has been in Champagne, some of it's been in Bordeaux, some of it has just been in kind of other spots around the country. So Paris very much has my heart. France has my heart. And it actually turns out that my dad's grandmother, his mother's mother, comes from Paris. And I never knew that. I did not know that when I was living there. And it turned out that we lived in the same neighborhood. So the apartment that I randomly wound up in my early 20s was just a few blocks walk from the apartment she lived in when she was in her early 20s, before she met my great grandfather, who was an American GI during World War I, who took her home as his French war bride. So, but it's just funny how it all connects. I had no idea that I had this French background until that. So.
That's fantastic. So we've got some really great questions on here, and some of them are tying together. We've got Anna is asking, how do you balance the demands of writing with other responsibilities? And then we've got Jenny is asking, how do you kind of structure your writing days? So I feel like those maybe kind of go hand in hand with your writing process.
No, those are great questions. And there's a pre-pandemic answer and a post-pandemic answer, or like a during the pandemic answer. So typically, I mentioned I have a 4-year-old. Typically, prior to all this weirdness in our world, I would write when he was in school. He went to preschool 3 days a week, or 3 mornings a week, and that was my writing time. And then I would also write on weekends. Now that the pandemic has been going on, and he's been out of school since March, and we have chosen not to have his babysitter come in, just to kind of keep everyone as protected as possible and as safe as possible. It's been a whole different ball game, and I have a book due in November, so I can't say like, oh well, this isn't the time to write. Well, it has to be the time to write. So I really struggled for a while. It was difficult. I'm still kind of struggling a little bit with it because it is hard. I mean, you can't be everything to everyone, including yourself, all the time. And I think that for a lot of us, that's what this time period is asking of us. It's asking us to step up and have responsibilities that we didn't have before, or that we weren't used to juggling before. So that has been a challenge. But with the help of the other Friends in Fiction authors, and I'll tell you about Friends in Fiction in a minute, but the other authors are Mary Kay Andrews, Mary Alice Monroe, Christy Woodson Harvey, and Patty Callahan Henry, who are good friends of mine. And so we work together on Friends in Fiction. I don't think we go more than 3 hours without texting each other about something. And I write with them every morning, 7 days a week. We wake up early, and we call it our sprints, and we sprint every morning, which basically means, butt in chair by 7 a.m. And you start writing until you have to start your day. So most days I'm up at about 5:30 because I have to catch up on emails and things like that. And sometimes I want to get a little research in before I write, or even start a little bit before Mary Kay Andrews says go, because she's usually the one to say go at 7 a.m. Or 8 a.m. on weekends sometimes. But that has helped me to get these words out, words that I was afraid that I wasn't going to get out, and that I was going to completely miss my November deadline. And thanks to those women, and the motivation they give me to just sit down every day and show up and do the work, I'll probably have it done a month before the deadline, which will give me time to edit it. So that has been it now. And I think one of you asked about process a little bit. I always outline first. I outline in a lot of detail. And because I have the outline, I have a roadmap to how the book is going to unfold. I always veer off that map a little bit, just because the characters, once they develop, begin to do things that you didn't maybe anticipate at the beginning, or things that seem like they would fit with the plot no longer fit, or you do a little bit of research and it turns out that what you envisioned isn't really something that could happen. But I mostly follow the outline that I laid out, and that kind of keeps me going too. So I outline, well, I do a lot of research, then I outline, then I write. And as I'm writing, I'm doing a lot of research. And then as I'm editing, after I finish the first draft, I'm doing a lot of research too. I hope that answered it. Sorry, that was a long answer to a short question.
It does. It really does. Thank you. So Carol was asking, just a quick side question here. Carol was asking about all of your books are in the third person. Are all of your books in the third person? And if so, why?
No, they're not. When I can't even remember. I think the Book of Lost Names. I know I have to even look. No, the Book of Lost Names starts with first person. It's Saturday morning, and I'm midway through my shift at the Winter Park Library. But then the chapters in the past are in the third person. I don't have a good answer for why. When I started my career, I was writing chick lit, romantic comedies, and I think those were all in the first person. That was what I was most comfortable writing in at the time. I think those were all in the first person, and that was kind of what people were in general doing with chick lit. I think most of the books that were coming out at that time in that genre, not all of them, but I think most of them, the trend was toward first person. Now I think I prefer writing in third person. But in a way that you're very much inside the main character's head. So it's basically first person in third person, if that makes sense. But there's no, it's what comes out of me, and it's how the story feels as I'm writing it. I wish I had a better explanation for why I do it, but I use a mix now.
You don't always have to have the perfect answers to some of these questions. People are just wondering, kind of getting behind the scenes a little bit, and that's what's so much fun. And I love the story about having your friends kind of chide you a little bit at 7 a.m. That's what friends are for. That is truly.
They've saved me so many times.
This is why we have, book clubs and girls groups and running clubs. It really does help us stay motivated and on task.
You're totally right. Yep.
So I just have a really pleasant compliment here from Ellen. She has said that she just learned about your books through Friends in Fiction, and she had gone back and read some of your earlier books and then progressed through to the newer ones. And she really just wanted to offer a compliment on how well your work has evolved. And
I'm almost embarrassed.
Developed into a very fine author.
Thank you so much. I appreciate that. It's almost it's weird. It was like a different person writing those earlier books. And I mean, I was fortunate enough to sell those books and be able to grow and hone my craft while I was making some money doing it, and having books come out in the world and having those adventures that went along with them. But I'm a very different writer today than I was prior to The Sweetness of Forgetting. I feel like there was a real shift that happened between 2010 and 2012 that and I'm much more the writer I am now beginning in 2012, if that makes sense. Which coincided, I turned 30 right around that time, a couple years before that. But while I was writing The Sweetness of Forgetting, that was, I think the shift in the books happened just with like a natural shift in life too, if that makes sense.
It does. I think some of the things I have said maybe 10 or 15 years ago, maybe not, would be the things I would say today. I think that's time gives wisdom to us all.
Right, that's part of it. Like we all evolve. And, yeah.
And what we said, 10, 15 years ago, maybe nothing wrong with it, but, just maybe things have changed a little bit, progressed.
Exactly.
So we've got a question here from Jenny. She was wondering, do you typically know the ending of your books before you start them?
For sure before I start writing the chapters, because I've outlined very extensively, and they always end the way I think, or almost always end the way I think they're going to in the outlines. But when do I know the endings? That's a really good question. I know when I sit down to start the outline, I know the general arc I want the book to take. I know the general direction I want it to take, but it's not until I begin outlining that the pieces fill in and the ending comes together. So like at the beginning, I'll know who's going to live and who's not going to live. But like, for example, in this book, the Book of Lost Names, I knew there was going to be a villain sort of who comes into play toward the end. I did not know who it was going to be until I had finished the outline. So the books sometimes surprise me, but in the writing process, when I'm actually doing the writing, I always know how it's going to end. Good question.
That's awesome. So Susan was asking, and I'm sorry, I'm going to be taking notes on this answer that you give right now. What is on your to read list?
Oh gosh, I always should have a better answer. Prepared for that. So I'm rereading right now Fiona Davis's The Lions of Fifth Avenue, which comes out in 2 weeks. It comes out August 4th. She's actually going to be our guest on Friends in Fiction on July 29th, which is one reason why I'm rereading it. I actually blurbed it, which means that I gave her a quote for it. So I read it like probably, I think I read it in December. I think December or January. But I wanted to refresh my memory. And it's just such a pleasant, good book to read. And like my book, like the Book of Lost Names, it has a library at its core. It is set in the New York Public Library, and one of the main characters is a librarian. And it is like the Book of Lost Names is kind of an ode to the power of books. So she and I have actually done a couple of events together, and we have one more planned with the Cuyahoga County Library in Ohio in August. To talk about kind of what our books have in common. And she is such a lovely writer and such a lovely person, and the book is so wonderful. So The Lions of Fifth Avenue, I would strongly recommend. There's another writer that, I feel like this is such a difficult time to be a debut novelist. So I like to recommend some of the debut novels I am reading and that I'm really liking. One I read several months ago, but it's worth mentioning because it's so good. It's called You and Me and Us. I think that's the name of it, but by Alison Hammer. And it is one that you want to have your tissues next to you. So like if you need a good cry, this is the book to do it. But it is set in on a beach town in the Florida Panhandle, and it's about a family who goes there when the father in the family, it's a mother, father, and child, and the father is dying from cancer. And it's about their last summer together as they're losing him. And it's hard to believe it's a debut because it's just so well written. So that's Alison Hammer. There's another debut I'm reading right now, but it's not going to be out. I think it comes out in March. It's at least a few months away. It's a book called The Lost Apothecary, I think, by Sarah Penner. I'm only a few chapters into it, but it's great. So that's another debut novel. I just read The Vanishing Half by Britt Bennett, which of course everybody's reading. It's like at the top of toward the top of the New York Times bestseller list. But that book was phenomenal. As was Such a Fun Age by Kylie Reed. And I just finished, she was our guest last week on Friends in Fiction. So I finished Party of Two, which was her Jasmine Guillory's most recent novel. And it was really good. It was a really light romantic comedy with some hidden depth. And as I kept saying to her on Friends in Fiction, it just made me hungry to read it. She just talks about cake and martinis and French fries, and it just all I want to do now that I'm saying it is go eat some cake and drink some martinis and have some French fries. So
Jasmine's book make me very hungry when I read Jasmine's books. And I appreciate you answering that question. I know it's a bit of a loaded question. Those of us who love libraries and work at libraries, it tends to be a bit of a loaded question when we ask, what are you reading? It's wait, audio or actual book? Wait, hold on. I have to get my answer ready here.
right, exactly, right.
So Debbie has a great comment here. She said, after visiting the House of Mum on her vacation last year, the winemaker's wife was especially relevant. She said she could smell the caves as you had written about them.
That is so. There could not be a better compliment about that book. Thank you so much. That was the trip I took to Champagne was so necessary in being able to inject those details. But it- when you know Champagne and when you know the history of Champagne, the place, not necessarily the wine, um, I mean, it just comes alive. So I'm glad you felt like that. And gosh, what a magical place that is. I'm so glad you get a chance to visit.
So I've got one question here from Anna. She was wondering, if you were to genre hop, which genre would you be interested in trying?
Gosh. Well, I've written a couple young adult novels, so I could see doing that again. No, I mean, I think women's fiction, or just mainstream fiction with female main characters, is really where I'm comfortable. I mean, I don't know that I'm always going to be writing historical fiction, but I think that I think the hearts of my books are always going to be the same, I hope. So like hopefully whatever story I'm telling, you'll find familiar things in my books. I mean, I love reading thrillers. I would love to write a thriller. I'm just not sure I would be very good at it. So it's just a totally different kind of storytelling and a different balance of plot and character development. But maybe it'd be fun to try. So yeah, thriller if I had to jump. If I had to jump. Oh no, wait, middle grade. I really would love to write like middle grade or early chapter books, but that's more just because I have a 4-year-old and I would love for him to be reading my books because I can't really hand him the book of last names and be like, have at it because he's so that's not gonna happen. So
That would be a great parenting, here, son, read this book. It's my book. This is my book. Please read my book.
right.
um, so, of course, people are asking, they're dying to know what book is coming out next. Do you have a title for your next book that comes out, and do you know when it's coming?
Oh, I don't have a title. It'll be out next summer. It's due in November. I am going to turn it in. I'm well on the way. It is also World War II. It is set in the forests of Poland and Belarus, and it's very different than what I've written before. I think at the core is the same kind of story. Somebody kind of being thrust into an unexpected situation and making the decision to rise up and do the right thing, again, and risking her life in the process. But yeah, that's about what I can say right now. I do not have a title, which is really weird because I usually have a title very early on. And this one is driving me crazy. The working title has been Dove of the Dark Forest, which I love. And I think that's why I'm having trouble coming up with a title because my editor has said she thinks that sounds too much like a YA fantasy, like a young adult fantasy novel. And I can see that point. But it's the title of the book in my head. And so it's really hard to move away from that. So it's going to be something to do with doves and forests and darkness, but that's probably not going to be it.
Well, thank you so much for answering that question and for all the questions that you answered this evening. We are so excited to have you here on the front end of this virtual book tour. So we've got one quick thing. We've got a lucky participant this evening is going to get a copy of your new book. And drum roll, please. The name is Jane Lance. Jane Lance is going to get a copy of your book. Jane, we will contact you via email on how we're going to make that happen. So thank you for joining us. I did want to let you know that we had 100 friends with us this evening. 100 people participated in this program. We really appreciated everybody coming out. And I would like you to give one last plug on your Friends in Fiction. Just let people know how they can find it because we've had lots of requests.
Awesome. Well, first of all, I can't believe 100 of you turned up on a Monday night to listen to me talk. I hope you had a good time, and I I so appreciate you all coming. So Friends in Fiction is a good time. I'm not very entertaining on my own, but 5 of us together managed to be entertaining, I think. So again, it's me, Mary Kay Andrews, Mary Alice Monroe, Christy Woodson Harvey, and Patty Callahan Henry. Our Facebook group is called Friends in Fiction. You just search for Friends in Fiction on Facebook and you'll easily find us. We have about 13,500 members, which is pretty amazing since we just started it in April. We can't believe how we've grown. And all you have to do is join the group. It's 13,000 book lovers, and there's tons of conversation. I mean, every time I go on there, there's like 30 different new posts I have to approve. People talk about books, and not just our books. They talk about all the books they're loving, all the books they're reading. So it's a great community to engage in if you love books. But kind of the highlight of every week for us is every Wednesday night at 7 p.m. Eastern, we do a Facebook Live show. So it's the 5 of us authors, and we have special guests. So far we've had Kristen Hanna, we've had Delia Owens, we've had Lisa Wingate. Like, it's just been amazing. You can find all of those old videos on either friendsinfiction.com or archived on the Facebook group page. But yeah, coming up with this Wednesday, we're going to be talking about the Book of Lost Names, my book, but we're actually going to have our first musical guest, which is Ken Block and Drew Copeland from the band Sister Hazel, who sang the huge hit All For You in the late 90s, and they've had so many hits since then. They're actually my favorite band, so I'm super excited. They're going to be there this week with us. We're going to talk about storytelling and song. Next week is Fiona Davis, and then we have Ellen Hildebrand, we have Karen Slaughter, we have Christina McMorris, and we have Ataf Ram. I might be saying her name incorrectly, but she's a phenomenal writer. So it's going to be awesome, and we just have nailed down a few people for our fall lineup that we have not announced yet. It is like so good. I'm so excited. So it's fun. You can ask us your questions live. It's an adventure every week, and the 5 of us are just a little crazy together in a good way.
It's been a fantastic platform, and it's kept us very entertained through this pandemic and having to stay home. It's been very nice to have some interaction still with some of our favorite authors. So this has been recorded this evening, so we are also going to archive this on the Friends of the Lexington Main Library page, as well as the Lexington County Library's website as well. So again, thank you everybody for supporting the Friends of the Lexington Main Library, and Kristin on her the new book tour. Please make sure you go out and get a copy of the book. We really do appreciate you joining us this evening. Thank you so much, everybody, for attending. Have a great night.
Thank you so much. This was so fun. Thanks for having me.
Bye.
Thank you.
Bye, Kristin. Thank you.
Thanks so much. Bye. Thank you.
Bye.